Hello, my name is Mauricio Valdés and I'm the curator of the Immersive Sound Studio at Heka Lab. And we're presenting the first conversation of a series that we're organizing at Heka with residents that come to the studio. And for this time we have Åke Parmerud that comes from Sweden. And he's going to do 3 activities with us. This interview, he's going to do a masterclass that we organize for tomorrow and Saturday here. It's a private event for people we invite. And he's also going to develop a software for us that includes the specific instrument that we build at Heka with the speakers and how to interact with the space. Okay, welcome to our first interview that we're having around the audio space that we have, the sound lab that we're building. And it's a pleasure to have you here. We would like to have a small interview around, first of all, your experience on multi-sound music and immersive formats. You have seen them all, most certainly.
Well, most of them.
Yeah, and it would be probably too long to talk about all the fields in which you have.
Yeah, not to mention how boring it would be.
How your profession diversified because of that, because of the use of technology, and how many opportunities you have had that you wouldn't have had if you wouldn't make this turn to technology in your stages with instrumental.
Oh, you mean like compared to if I would have been, stuck in writing instrumental music, exactly, or what? Yeah, okay. Well, that's a big difference, of course. I mean, historically, people have been trying to spread singers and instruments in the room, in the space, to create this kind of, oh, wow, there's something coming from behind, or something coming from outside. So it's actually
samples in different parts of the church.
Yeah. So it's actually quite an old idea to play with the space like that. But of course, with modern technology, you can do it more easily, and obviously you can do more advanced stuff, depending on the setup of things. Well, when I started, which was like in the Stone Age sometime, everything was projected through stereo, even in concerts. And so it took some time before the development of actually using many loudspeakers to be able to do it in, well, multi-channel format is actually something that has been around more like everyday thing since maybe the 2000 and onwards. Yeah. So one of the standard formats is like eight speakers surround. But you also had this acousmonium thing, or with a lot of loudspeakers, but you would still use stereo sounds, and then you would sort of project them in the space.
Diffuse them in different speakers.
Yeah. So you got this feeling of it actually being sort of a multi-channel thing,
right?
Depending on how you control the loudspeaker volumes here and there, and also because different loudspeakers has, which is typical for it, at least the original acousmonium from GRM, that each loudspeaker is supposed to have its own characteristics.
And the frequency response.
Yeah, exactly.
So they diffuse the same sound in different ways.
And that's why they called it also a loudspeaker orchestra. So it's the same, like you have basses, contrabasses, you have this and this and this. So actually, trying to imagine the setup.
The poetic element is to evoke the orchestra and the disposition between audience and sources are the same as a classical music concert. Right? As a classically educated musician, if I wouldn't have had access to these kind of tools, my professional development would be shrink to that area, to music that is written in paper only. And I see a hole in the music academy in the sense that the kids don't have these tools. They don't know how much they can enhance their professional life when they jump into technology, and they use it as a tool, not as an enemy. And it's been seen, at least since I was studying in the 90s. The computer music was considered the enemy of the tradition somehow. And just because of that...
You must have had a very hard life.
It wasn't hard. It hasn't been hard. But I mean...
But you make it sound like
No, I'm saying that
I never had that feeling. You know, I never had this feeling of confrontation.
Yeah.
But then again, like, you know, I don't really approve of institutions. I don't like institutions and the way that education is done at various, you know, higher education levels for composing or whatever. And because exactly for that reason, because it sort of puts some implications on top of you to say that, yeah, well, this is the way it should have, this is the way you should do it, you know, this is good and this other way is bad.
And this is what I was questioning about.
Yeah, okay.
How much you gain as an artist when you just liberate from that. That you can allow yourself to get involved in projects with dance, or you get involved with visual arts and exhibitions, and not only with the concert music. It was not hard life, but it was sort of indoctrinating in a way.
Yeah.
To just follow one path like that. Most of my colleagues had to follow the footprints of a teacher in order to make a professional life.
It's terrible. It's absolutely abominable. That, which is a very nice word.
It's a good word. Yeah.
But I never had that problem, you see, because I was never, you know, under the influence in that sense. So I always made my own choices.
And you also come from image, no? You started as a photographer.
I started as a photographer as well. So it's, for me, it's always been a natural thing to work across media outputs, whatever it can be, video, still images, or work together like with other people, dance, or whatever it can be. It was never...
Theater.
All theater. It was never, you know, a problem for me.
Right.
It was all, you know, all the time it was natural to do that.
Yeah, I'm asking you this, and this is one of the main reasons I wanted to invite you to come over to Heka, is because we want to also have not only production of pieces and having a specialist coming in and producing pieces in our sound room, but to see it as an opportunity to diversify their professional spectrum. And in this line, or in this sense, what do you think, if you would be teaching in the Academy of Music, what would you recommend them to get into in order to enhance their professional life and to get more broad outputs and not be such a specialist as somehow it's been taught for centuries? But there's, like you said, there's some way to do things valid and some invalid. And be a menace to step out from this. It's a conflicted thing for young people. I mean, it's difficult to really be sure that what they were taught is not necessarily absolute. No? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean, but I mean, you're putting the question like, what would I do if I would be teaching?
Yeah, what would be the advice for the younger generations and people who doesn't have experience?
No, well, I mean, I have been teaching at the university in Gothenburg, composition. But yeah, I was promoting that they would do like interactive installation stuff, or, you know, working with this and that other medium. And we had a collaboration with the Academy for Photography, so that they would, you know, create works together with students from there. I don't know. It was like really difficult to make them lose.
But do you think it's a problem with the students, or is it a problem with they're old enough to just not being able to reconsider certain things?
But it's so easy when you get into an institution, right? You're supposed to fulfill certain requirements, like you know, able to write like this or hear like that, and whatever, blah 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 blah. And so you're already sort of in a locked position once you are accepted as a student, because you need all this background knowledge to even get into the institution in the first place. So already there, I think the students have like a problem to sort of break free from all these expectations of what a composer, for instance, is supposed to be doing and how to do it and all this, you know. So I mean, it's not very surprising, but still, once you're in there, I think it's a combination of, you know, the structure of the educational institution and the students themselves. I mean, I wouldn't blame just the students, but I wouldn't blame the institutions totally as well, because everybody has a free mind and you can actually do whatever you want from a certain point. But it's this combination of trying to live up to certain standards of historical values and aesthetics and all that. And of course, I mean, we had quite good resources at the university in terms of technology, and we had lots of nice synthesizers and computers, whatever, and multi-channel surround systems. But it's really hard to get people to understand that this is an open space. Okay, all this technology is just an open space. It's empty, you know. It's a blank paper, and then you have to sort of yourself fill it with content that is, you know, can be anything. And that is what I felt was the problem with the students, that they rarely had any ideas of how to fill this blank, you know, space.
Right. Yeah, I mean. It's their decision, and also the institutions to prepare them with tools. But also the immersive audio nowadays, especially after the pandemic, have accelerated a lot. No? They had a exponential use. People start to consume music at home alone, and many of the formats that have been out can be enjoyed at home, and you can have access to music that it was impossible 3 years ago. It was the amount of demand in consumption and offer that is online for multi-channel formats. It's enormously higher now than it was in 2019, right?
Well, if you tell me, so I believe you. I haven't noticed it.
So in my opinion, yes. Just in terms of the amount of companies that have jumped into these different industries, from video gaming or sound therapy, or things that like field recordings, that they're using this and people's consuming it more at home. But it's a kind of a fresh field now. How to use this in a way that can be artistically valuable, and also something that can give them a way of living. You know.
Are you joking right now?
Why? Joking.
I mean, like, you're saying this like as you know, if you do it the right way, then you can actually make money from it.
No, I mean that if you have the idea of having a profession, like when I was starting or when you were starting even more, that you could do one thing and be a specialist in that field, was a promise that it could be possible. You could be a composer that writes music for chamber ensemble your whole life. Today, I don't think this is applicable to
come on, seriously though.
I don't think so.
It's the same shit now as it was before, believe me.
Really?
You know, yeah. There is no difference.
I think now you're gonna have to reinvent yourself. Like if I was here with the younger people that I have contact with, they know, most of them know, that there will be no one profession in their life. They're gonna have to change, and they're gonna have to move from one way of doing stuff to another. You have to be more flexible now. That it was. No. Most of the people my age has been doing the same thing for 20 years, and they won't change in the next 20 years. They'll keep doing the same. And I don't think this is for the next generations.
I'm not really sure about that theory. I think it's still, because I can see...
I don't see it as a fear, huh? I see it as a possibility.
Well, you know, if we're talking about survival,
and also about being productive personally, like I say in artistic terms. Like, you cannot, I don't know, to put an example, if you compose music a la Xenakis today, and you decide to do this for your whole life,
that would be a very stupid idea.
But there are people who still do it.
Yeah, I know, and it's still a very bad idea.
But yeah, what I'm trying to confront this is that when you decide that back in the 90s or in your time, in your studies, it was possible. There was a future possible. Now I don't think it is.
Look. Okay, let me tell you my story.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, there's about, I don't know exactly, but let's say there are like 200 composers in Sweden. How many?
That many?
Yeah.
I know 3.
You're not from Sweden. Anyways, but I mean registered as composers and part of the Composers Union and all that. How many of those do you think actually lives, I mean, from day to day, professionally?
Probably a handful of them.
Yeah. I'm one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the thing is that it's no matter the time, it's how you manage your professional career, and that you can do all the time now and it's the same shit.
You diversify.
What?
You diversify.
It doesn't matter.
It does.
No, I wasn't that diversified. I mean, I'm pretty much known for my music, not so much.
But you're more like a
stuff.
new media artist rather than a composer.
No, not really.
You consider yourself like you belong to the gang of composers?
No, I see the way the world sees me, and then they know me more as a composer, than anything else. I mean, I have done stuff, and I'm still doing stuff, but that is not what makes me known to the world outside. It's basically the music that I make. So it doesn't really matter that I do installations and stuff like that,
and also
or
dance
shows, or perform, or it doesn't really matter. That is not what put me on the map. That is the thing. So, and it doesn't matter who you are, because you always have to sort of focus on something, or the world around you will sort of make you noticeable as doing something of some kind that sort of lifts you in the general consciousness of the audience or the world around you. And so it doesn't really matter, It's the same, I'm telling you, it's the same shit now as it was before. It's not a really big difference. That's an illusion, I think.
But
no, of course, I mean, it's again this, like, I don't see any conflicts, you see? Because basically, everyone, any artist of any sort, is basically free, unless you live maybe in Russia these days. I don't know how that works, but I mean, basically, everybody is free to do whatever they want.
You get very philosophical. If you think that we're free to decide by ourselves.
Yeah, basically, I do believe that we have a certain amount of freedom. Not totally, but because it's also, again, we have to roll back to the survival kit thing. If you want to make money, maybe you have to do compromises here and there. Maybe you have to write music for film scores, or maybe video games or whatever to get the money rolling.
And it's also good. It's also entertaining.
Yeah, of course, it's fun. I've been doing a lot of film music, and I always like this. It's fun.
But some people is not free to think this is an alternative.
But they are too serious. They take life too seriously. You understand? They think that if they do anything that is associated with a less high level of art, then they can't touch that because they don't want to get their hands dirty.
And if there was a line, which would be the line that you think it is? Like the line to consider something high art and lower art, if you...
Yeah, well, just writing a film score would probably be considered.
But it's not the music level. Then. It's just the function of music.
But it's the whole concept of how music is supposed to be just in the background, supporting or whatever, which sort of diminish it as art.
Hierarchical.
Yeah. Because music should stand by itself, and that should do the whole thing. And that is why sometimes it's a bit tricky with multimedia, for instance, right? So to define what's the actual function of the music. Let's say we have that as our central thing in relation to other media, which is more, appropriate for the total conception of a piece and stuff like that. Because then you have to think in another way. Because then it's not so clear as it is in traditional ways of, like I said, film, for instance, where the music has a very defined role already historically. Yeah. But when you work in media art, it's not the same. Suddenly the music has a more floating kind of...
Yeah, the aesthetic is more indulgent. No?
Yeah, well, it can be the top dog of the whole experience, but it can also be like just
Yeah.
But then this is the thing, because then you have to think about the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And whatever you created is supposed to give to the audience,
Yeah.
And that makes the whole appreciation of what is high and low totally pointless.
And also, this is going to change. Like we were at the beginning of our conversation, you were saying that back in the day, everything was made in stereo. Cinema still, although we have movie theaters that have multi-channel immersive systems, is still the source of a voice is always in the center.
Yeah.
You never see the panning. You never see the source getting distant. No?
Actually, you do sometimes.
It's
getting there.
This is what I was going. Yeah. Now, when you have this layer, this possibility, and you have these new formats like Dolby Atmos that can allow you to have it at home in a soundbar, that you can position the sound in a room if you calibrate it well, the cinema and the role of music will change as well, because you will be able to not only be in the background, because you can also create different rooms in terms of space where the sound can exist.
Well, I don't know when that is going to happen in the film industry. I mean, I see more the surround format used as for effects.
Yeah.
So it's like a car coming from behind, passing over your head and stuff like that. Yeah.
Like there are things that also video game is changing. I don't see that, for instance. Video game in terms of image rendering and the power that you can see on the content that you have an image is not equivalent to what you get in sound. And this is the other question I wanted to ask you. How do you see, like you were just mentioning that cinema already got influenced by sound art, but if you go back to the 1960s in Mexico, this surrealistic cinema of wrestlers, like lucha libre films, when you have this, the sound design is synthesizers that were very close to Pierre Schaeffer time, and they were using concrete music in cinema and never really took a place. I mean, it was 10, 15 years of cinema, but the aesthetics were there. Like you could have this crazy bucla synthesizer for making a piece of a film with El Santo, no?
You have to show me that.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is that I haven't
never heard that.
You never heard these films? It's fascinating.
Okay. Well.
It's really strange films, but the video game, it's so... I don't play games, but when I take a peek, and I have nephews that do, or friends that still do it, I don't see an equivalent proposal in the sound that I hear that I see on the image. This is something that I think many musicians and composers could jump in and sophisticate it a little bit. But normally this is done by one person who does everything. And this is another part of a question or the conversation that I wanted to link. We were talking about this morning about the enormous leap that technology and music had between 1980s and 2000. Since 2000, the innovation of sound in terms of content, structure, form, and stuff kind of seemed like it got stopped.
But that is the problem with AI. It has to be trained. It has to. It's a monkey fucking brain. Okay. That is not the way to go. AI has to be, evolved beyond having to be working with, training patterns and all. Because what does that make? It makes just a repetition. Because you put in rules. I mean, I've heard really, really good sounding AI music really boring, but really by the book. Right?
I know what you mean.
And that is not interesting. So I don't see...
For me neither. That part is not interesting, but I see it as a process in which at some point the way that it will understand the structure, the pitches, the descriptors that AI can bring after a certain amount of years of training will be able to overcome what we consider to be the structure that makes our music valid. You see a score and then you go to a jury and it has all the elements. That's AI what we're doing already.
But the thing is, by that time, then...
Do you think it's too in the future? Too much?
No, in the future? Maybe not that far in the future, but it's in the future, I still think. And at that point of time, we can stop composing. You know, we have no need for it anymore. We just leave it to the AIs. Surprise me, kind of. You know. So where's the point?
But it could be...
I think it's a good. I think everybody should stop composing because it's a stupid way of dealing with life, anyways. But since we are still in the same kind of historical process of composer writing music and doing this and that, up until the point where the AIs actually do the really clever thing and takes off and surprises us, and then we can stop. Then we don't have to do it anymore.
But this is another thing. Just I have two more things that I would like to talk. I understand your point, but back in the 80s, going back to when the computer music started to be formalized inside the institutions, I know it was happening before, but it had a different purpose than what it did until EarCam came to happen. Right?
You weren't even born.
I know, I was born, but I know the kid. I read it, and I met a few other people that were there when it started.
Okay, go on.
But when they start to have this, I think it's a brilliant idea to have one composer who's supposed to have ideas how technology can help the person to make better music and have a technical assistant. This formula of having one I'm asking you because this is somehow what we're trying to do in Heka now, at least in the audio, is that we want to be transducers of people who have ideas how to use the space and sound, regardless of the aesthetic, like the most agnostic approach that we can be. But you build your own stuff, you build your software, like you do your image, you do your editing, This is a completely different persona in the field of art that it was in the 80s. In the 80s, you have Pierre Boulez who was sitting down and there was an army of programmers around him, and he said, I want to have a flute that it can interact with the computer and trigger samples, and I wanted to have a MIDI, and then the guys had to code it. And this is where I saw more advanced. But since now we have people who's like in conference like the ICNC that you've been working more than me, and had this industry that just create these people who's doing everything. They're not the researchers only anymore. They also think they're performers. And they go on stage and they give concerts and stuff. And the same with artists. We think we're programmers as well. So I don't know if this formula can be retaken, the EarCam formula of having someone who can fulfill your imagination.
Well,
my feeling that it's gone, and now we have to be todólogos, like we're supposed to do.
First of all, okay, let's go back to the 80s and this having an assistant that helps you to realize whatever. That started basically, I think, with Stockhausen and all that. If you see his scores and everything, like every parameter is there, like settings for oscillators, whatever. The reaction that my generation had towards this way of working was that basically you don't have control of what you're doing. So it's like I felt it, and my colleagues felt it as well, that you are maybe you have some ideas. I want it to sound like umbrella, whatever. But I have no clue of how that is supposed to happen. And the process of actually working with developing sound yourself is that on the way of, you know, trying to make something sound like an umbrella, you suddenly come across different roads that leads to other places that you didn't expect.
And this is where beauty can appear.
Yeah, exactly. And so that, for us, it was very important to be able to master the craft in itself, understand what, you know, what we were doing and how we were doing it, and all this. So then, of course, I mean, it happens all the time. You know, it's like people are like, let's say, a choreographer, you know, because I've been working with that, and they have their ideas about things they want to happen on the stage and stuff. They don't have a clue how to do that.
Many of them don't.
But I have. So I become, in that sense, I become that kind of assistant to try to realize their ideas, solve their problems.
Yeah.
And in that case, of course, there's always a limit to how much you can master yourself, like one person. I mean, I'm pretty good because I can do a lot of stuff, including programming and all that, and then image and video and interactive stuff and all that. But there's a limit to how much you can sort of, right now, the development is going really fast, you know, in different areas of computer science and stuff, and I can't keep up with that.
No, that's impossible.
It's impossible. So maybe we are coming back more and more to what you are talking about, that we actually have to rely on other people's expertise to be able to, you know, do whatever we dream of that we want to do. Because, no man is an island.
This is like one of the possible way out of this paralysis of creativity. But it also happened, like, I was very influenced when I moved to Slovenia by the free improvisation scene, because you know we don't have it. Like, we heard about it in Chicago, the ensembles of free improvisation, free jazz. Things that they were happening for us was completely different than what was happening in Europe. And one of the things that I realized, and that I found it so engaging, is that normally most of the sets were not good. They were not entertaining at all.
Well,
but there were
tell me something else that I'm not surprised by. Okay.
But there were moments on which, just because they have no control of what was happening, some things that I never heard before and many times after, that it only happens there. It only happens in this context when something emerged by not having control, that I found it so attractive. And I think we're lacking this somehow. Everything has to be post-produced in a very depurated way, so beauty is evident and is linear, no matter the aesthetics. But if you belong to that crowd, everything has to be in perfect execution. And I think we don't need that, or is one of the ways out as well. And the last thing I wanted to ask, but you have to say something about this.
Do I?
I don't know.
Nah, I hate improvisation.
You're
I'm so far from that. I mean, I've been there.
I know.
With, you know, free improvised music and stuff.
We've been a few concerts together and you're never satisfied.
No, not really. It's not really my thing. But I get your point that in certain situations, and, you know, like you say, suddenly things can happen.
And then everybody's floating.
Yeah. Well, then,
we all agree. We all know.
Yeah. It's like magic. Okay.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it happens very rarely.
It does. Yeah.
So, and then you have to live through all the boring parts.
But it's the same with orchestra music. Where how many festivals? I've been in probably 700 or 400 festivals of contemporary music.
Yeah.
And I remember 7 or 8 pieces.
Yeah. Well, that's sort of normal.
Then it's the ratio is the same.
Yeah, but it's not that, because it's a different thing. I mean, all those pieces, they are like structured, and someone has been thinking their brains out, and still create totally boring music. Okay,
exactly, yeah.
So, but at least it's planned boring music. Yeah, you understand?
Yeah.
So it's sort of predictable in that way. Whereas, you know, improvised music is also predictable, but not in the same way as this sort of
that is structured, written, executed, rehearsed,
but
corrected.
Yes, but like, of course, it takes probably less than a minute before you know what's going to happen in one of those orchestra pieces. Oh, it's one of those, right? Because you know already, you heard so many of the same, so you can sort of just look through it immediately. That's what I'm telling my students, if I ever have any, that you basically have 1 minute maximum
of my attention
of catching the attention of the audience of any kind. And if you fuck that up, you can just forget about writing.
And this is my last question, exactly connected to this. The music that you produce, you obviously consume most of the time. You get exposed to music, but when you listen music that is not yours, how do you engage your attention? What are the things that in this minute that you say is the window of tolerance? What are the elements that you can think that you could remember that trigger your attention or seduce you to the point that you're willing to accept whatever comes from that point on and accept it as valid in your criteria, by your biases and...
I have a very simple answer to that. Surprise me.
So tell me one example.
No, I'm not going to say anything because it's not a surprise.
But you consume music?
Not very much.
Not very much.
No.
This is one of the things that I found very tragic in our profession. That most of us don't consume music. Even from colleagues or from others. That we spend so much time doing that somehow it becomes, we have a a lot of blind spots in our spectrum. And
I used to say to people, although it's not true, but
but I will still saying it.
Yeah, but I will still say it, that I don't like music, you know. I would even go as far to say as I fucking hate music. And so just like, don't play stuff to me, please, okay?
Don't show me your music.
Don't show me your music, whatever. But of course it's not true. I do like music a lot. But it's more of a statement of the nature of boredom that is sort of built into the situation where you like, there's too much bad music around, totally boring, pointless, meaningless, idiotic music being produced for no good reason.
Do you think it's more now than 30, 40 years ago?
No, it's the same shit.
It's the same. But there was no, composition prize in Madagascar 30 years ago. Now
they have one now?
I'm just shooting one name of a country that I haven't met one composer. But there must be one composition prize.
Right. Of course, we have the internet now, and people are putting their music all over the
accessibility.
Space. Yes, of course, la. So relatively, there is more, of course, today. But the foundation of it is the same. That most of the music that is put out there is boring. It's pointless. It's like, yes, please turn it off.
That's the end of our interview. Thanks a lot. That was a good closing statement. Please shut it down. Thanks a lot, Åke.
Oh, my pleasure. Let's go have a drink.